I want to bring in my next guest. We are joined with Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof, he is former senior policy analyst for the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of foreign policy, or let's say experience, in the Department of Defense. Welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning, Michael? You doing all right?
I'm great, Jamal. Thank you very much for having me. I was
No,
listening
man.
to Caleb. I knew Caleb when he was on RT.
Did you? Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. You would have met him on RT. Yeah,
Oh
the
yeah.
man
Oh
is
yeah.
brilliant. He's absolutely
Oh
brilliant.
yeah.
Everything comes out of his mouth.
Very good. He's very good.
Um, I want to get to the mineral deal. So apparently Donald Trump has mobbed his way into a mineral deal with Ukraine. This is mind blowing to me, as I was telling my audience. If you are a rando person in Ukraine, just random person, you vote for Zelensky because you want the war to stop. Zelensky gets in after the 2014 coup when they overthrew the Yanukovych government. So the idea that this was a democracy is nonsense. It was off the table from the moment of the coup. You get assurances from Washington, from Europe, that you don't have to live up to the Minsk agreements, which were set in order to stop a larger war. So you blow it off. They dump all of this military, they do all of this spending into your country that is effectively on the border of Russia. And in doing so, you go on a killing spree with ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the east. Russia gets involved. Istanbul agreements comes to fruition. Boris Johnson comes in and tells them, hey, you don't have to live up to these agreements either. In fact, we'll give you all of the money in the world, and you can beat them on the ground, and our economic sanctions will be crushing. So just keep fighting. The war will be great. Zelensky pulls out of that agreement, of the Istanbul agreements, and continues to fight. 3 years later, with 600 dead Ukrainians, somebody has to ask, what was this for? And then on top of that, you're now put in this position of, hey, I understand that you've lost 20% of your territory, but you also now need to give us 50% of your mineral wealth for the foreseeable future. That is astonishing. And for all of these people, like, we're with Ukraine, we're back in Ukraine. This doesn't look like back in Ukraine. This looks like a country that has been carved up, to put it mildly. Give me your take on this mineral deal. Zelensky is apparently supposed to be coming here on Friday in order to sign the agreement.
Well, the Zelensky was voted in originally on the premise that he promised that he was going to establish peace with Russia. Just the opposite has happened, and we see Ukraine today as just a shadow of what it used to be, and it's probably going to be, as you say, carved up even more.
Yeah.
In terms of this minerals agreement, there's no security guarantee in it.
Nope.
It's only economic.
Just be clear: no NATO, no security agreements, no troops on the ground, no agreements at all. Really, all of that stuff is supposed to be worked out after the fact. It's just wild.
Well, and the notion of putting Eastern or European troops in as peacekeepers, I think, is a non-starter, which is one of the proposals on the security side of it. On the economic side, just before we leave that, it's meant to be a payback for all that what Trump sees as all the wealth and treasure that the United States has poured in, but got nothing in return. Whereas the Europeans had established loans, which I must say will probably never be paid back anyway. But now we have something tangible if you can extract. But most of the rare earths, as opposed to the minerals, are in the eastern part, which is occupied by the Russians. Putin, in very recent days, has said, "Hey, we're happy to do a deal with the United States." Now, that's probably created a little consternation internally, but I think it reaps profits for Russia as well as the United States. Now, this agreement is meant to be with Ukraine is meant to create a fund for reconstruction, because the United States has whittled it down to and Ukraine has whittled it down to that it'll be a 50-50 proposition. So whatever Ukraine makes out of it, they can apply that to reconstruction, and the United States would get 50% toward repayment, and up to, was it 300 billion, something of that sort. It used to be 500 billion. I think it's come down. So I think in one sense that is sort of a backdoor approach toward security in one respect, and that the United States will be wedded to the country to protect its investments. On the other hand, if the Europeans, and they were talking about this just day before yesterday, of passing $200 billion worth of the profits from the interest rather from the Russian frozen assets to continue the war. Well, that's going to be a non-starter. I think what Trump is negotiating, frankly, without saying so, is the U.S. role in the Ukraine crisis. We're out of it except for the economic interest. And if the Europeans want to go at it, Article 5 will not apply. There will be no agreement for NATO. And frankly, the Europeans, and I think they admit, they cannot do it on their own. So this thing may just, through attrition, come to a slow halt over time. But what will prevail will be the terms that the United States and Russia work out. And those terms seem to be emerging rather clearly. No giving up of territories by the Russians, no NATO. And I think what's left, and even Putin has said, he will, he's not for the disintegration of the Ukrainian state as such. But given that they have a destructive tendency anyway, and the fact that you have other countries that on the in Eastern Europe, which happen to be NATO countries, that are biting at the bit to take back portions of West Ukraine because of their ethnic populations. I think you're just going to see a shell of what used to be Ukraine.
Wow. What do you think?
That's my projection. I could be wrong, but I also believe that what is being worked out between.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What's being negotiated? Because, like you said, it can't just be Ukraine. It has to be more than that.
What's being worked out between Trump and Putin is something which is more geopolitically and geostrategically minded, in terms of two strategic partners of equal standing working with one another, whereas in which Ukraine is just a little cog, and Europe can either go along with it or not. The chances are they're not going to be able to do anything self-sustaining if they want to create. And I think it's also the beginning of the end of NATO as we know it today. And I think we're going to be seeing withdrawals from Germany, particularly with this rather hostile government that exists in Germany that's coming in right now. And I think that most of us don't care. And you know,
now what Germany thinks, no, not in the least.
No, we don't care. And you know, that's why you also see Trump focusing more in the Western Hemispheric area in terms of trying to reestablish, without saying so, the whole notion of spheres of influence, and actually work out strategic relationships with Russia, in which they go into joint ventures, which will be economic primarily, maybe even joint ventures into the Arctic. The notion, I think, on the part of the United States is to try to wean Russia from China.
Right.
But I don't see that happening. No, this is not the Cold War period like it used to be. They used to be our policy at one time. We used to do things with China during the Cold War against then Soviet Union, which in some cases were quite successful. But in reality, it's changed. And I also think, without Trump admitting to it, he's admitting that we indeed are in a multipolar, not a unipolar world today.
Where does Europe fit into this? They're complaining.
Where does Europe?
Yeah, where does Europe fit into this? Like Keith Kellogg has been initially, in the beginning, Donald Trump's people were making comments, and people like me were like, whoa, these comments are not conducive to creating an environment for peace. Then we find out that Keith Kellogg's job was effectively to babysit Europe, which is just utterly hilarious, right? In babysitting Europe, to effectively listen to their bitching, listen to their griping, but to not really do anything because he's not in part of the negotiations. He's just there to babysit. Macron comes to the US, tries to get Donald Trump's ear, lies about the start of the war, effectively saying Russia blew off the agreement. It was Europe that blew off the agreement. Trump listens to him, flim-flams him, and goes about his business, with the policy being what the policy is. Indicative or indicated by the UN vote, the UN Security Council resolution vote, that took a very neutral tone towards the war. Keir Starmer is apparently supposed to be also coming to have this kind of conversation with Trump. All of them are trying to convince Trump with all of these fanciful ideas of, hey, we just need American backing. We can put in European troops. Trump misspoke about Russia being okay with U.S. peacekeepers or peacekeepers from various nations. Regardless of the flag, Russia's pointed out this is a non-starter. Those people are nose under the camel's tent and would be attacked immediately. Does Europe have the capability of being a fly in the ointment? Like, meaning, even if Trump wanted to stop it, does Europe have any capability at all of doing so other than just complaining?
That's all they have. They have offered no alternatives. And as Trump pointed out, they all had 3 years to try to work something out. And you can't continue doing the same thing that doesn't work and hope for a different outcome. That, as they say, is the definition of insanity or idiocy, or both. And that's what we're seeing today. And the Europeans have nothing else. Look, UK just thinks the UK and all of NATO cannot do anything on a consistent, massive scale without the United States. All of their forces combined do not equal to what the United States can project. But yet they act like they're still imperial and frankly, the UK has got to finally come to grips with reality that it's got internal issues that higher inflation, and the people are disgruntled with Starmer. They want him out, and besides that, the UK itself is no bigger than the state of Indiana. They just need to give up their notions of empire. Look, the history of UK and I may have mentioned this to you in the past, but the history of UK and Russia, the animosity between the two go back centuries, centuries. And yet they want to continue, and the United States does not want to continue to get involved in their ancient historical disputes. I mean, that's what it boils down to. We've moved on, and we have other strategic interests in mind rather than just Europe. And given the way way things move today through communication and weapons programs and systems, it's made this a much, much smaller world. So and because it's much smaller, and we got major strategic partners in Russia and China, all with nuclear weapons, it's better to work and compete economically, but to work together on programs rather than to become hostile and adversarial toward each other. And I think that's going to be the reality. In time, I think Russia and the United States can resurrect some agreements, particularly on the numbers of nuclear weapons. Maybe there's even talk now by Trump of cutting military expenditure in half by everybody, including China. And Russia has stated that China appears to be interested in doing the same thing. Look, the Chinese budget is half of the United States military budget, and Russia's is half of that of China's.
Yeah, it's like $80 billion. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's we're trillion. Give or take a few million.
I am curious from your take on this. Like, with this kind of geopolitical shift on the world stage, and with all of these countries effectively trying to figure out, okay, where do we fit into this? China, Russia, India, the BRICS countries, the global South, Europe in its own kind of isolation bubble. How can I ask this question? It seems that Donald Trump is serious about moving forward with this, regardless of what Europe does, regardless of what Ukraine wants. And and is trying to come to some kind of terms of a deal, whatever that deal is. He seems he's going to let his people do it. He's going to go. He's going to have this big ceremony, either in Moscow or DC or wherever, when he shakes Putin's hand and says, "Okay, the world is at a new norm." Do you think we can maintain that new norm, though? Trump is going to be 80 years old. He's going to die at some point. Somebody else is going to be leading this country, be it Democrat or Republican. Is it possible to maintain that deal? Like, I guess what I'm asking is this a fickle mistress? Is this one of those things that, yeah, Trump is putting into play, but anybody can undo it with the same speed at which Trump put it into play? Or am I getting this wrong?
No, I think that after Trump's first term, you saw what happened afterwards under the Biden administration.
Right.
The world came apart, and all of the partnerships and balances, strategic balances in the world fell apart. And Trump is now trying to reconstruct that. After his term, unless a Republican is and with the same creativity and commitment to what's being formed now, is elected following him, I think we could be right back to where we started, because the Democrats have clearly shown they have no alternative approach except to complain about what Trump is doing, and secondly, to create adversarial roles for Russia and China. And in this world today, you cannot do that because of how sensitive and things are. And I see Taiwan potentially coming to a head before Trump's term is up.
Really?
28. Yeah.
Now, why do you think that's coming to a head?
By what Trump has been doing and saying in recent days on Taiwan, working with them, and it's almost, from the Chinese perspective, it's almost
like Ukraine.
What do you call it? A revocation of the one China policy.
Right. I consider it like Ukraine. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
please.
And I think that I think Russia and Xi Jinping are going to have to come to an understanding to avoid that problem. But Xi Jinping has made it very clear that inevitably Taiwan will come under China auspices altogether. So we'll see what happens. But we're heading for a confrontation there, and you see, and if you listen to the interview that Rubio, the Secretary of State, the new Secretary of State, just gave on Fox, he's basically saying that's where our shift is going to be, and that the United States is a Pacific power. So that does put us in direct confrontation with the Chinese from a military standpoint, but we can also convert that to economic competition if we so choose. But when the politics with Taiwan come into play, we've got to, then that's when things get really muddy. And the Chinese really have an advantage when it comes to Taiwan in some respects, because everything we do in the Pacific up against the Far East, it has to be imported. From aircraft carriers to setting up alliances and with Japan, South Korea, and I don't see those countries going up against China. They're not going to battle against it. We might use them as bases, but in the Eastern mindset, that might look like a potential for war and confrontation. And we've seen that with Kim Jong-un. Now he's been quiet, but now he's beginning to rustle feathers once again because he's not getting attention. And I see that problem emerging here by spring. So he's being neglected.
That's what I'm laughing at. He's not getting attention. Nobody's talking about him in this moment. He feels
feels left out.
Yeah. God, man, that's so wild. But Trump was willing to go and have that meeting with Kim Jong-un. And honestly, look, I despise Trump. Despise him. When he did that, I said, that's my president. Because that's what I want. It's a rational foreign policy. Like the notion that this guy has nukes. This guy's threatening to nuke America. And our response is, well, we don't talk to dictators. Okay, that's nonsense. We talk to people in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. We talk to all of these people. Don't give me this nonsense that we don't talk to dictators. It's nonsense. When Trump said, yes, I'm going to go. I'm going to shake his hand. I'm going to come to a deal. And it worked. Like how can I say this? I don't feel like a bit over the top over this, but it matters. Like this idea, it's a proof of concept. All the time, you're effectively told peace doesn't work. You got to be strong. Got to have a $1 trillion military. You got to be threatening. Otherwise, nobody takes you seriously. Donald Trump goes over there, shakes the man's hand, and they stop firing missiles into the Sea of Japan. And I said, oh my God, peace works. Meaning I can make agreements with people. These are rational actors. And I can make agreements with them, whether I like them or not, whether I like their country or not. The fact that he did it was a big deal to me, especially in the foreign policy sense. Do you get the sense that this is something that he's also going to do this time around? Do you get the sense that his job is, I believe I'm going to bring peace, not war. And if I need to talk to Kim Jong-un, if I need to talk to Xi Jinping, if I need to talk to Vladimir Putin, if I need whoever, I will have that conversation in order to do that. Do you get a sense that's where he is?
I do, and I think that's only because what has happened in the past hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked. Try something else. Now, you may not like Trump's personality. It's that New York bombastic nonsense, and overlording of everybody. But he's effective in terms of policy formulation and its implementation.
Yeah.
And so far, what he's doing is working. He is coming to a resolution in 4 weeks now, on Ukraine that we haven't been able to do in the last 4 years under Biden.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
I mean, that says something. And now they're talking potential for a ceasefire and working out deals. But when you have an economic stake in something, you're going to be less inclined to want to blow it up. And I think that's what.
So you think that's the point of the mineral deal? Because Steve Bannon had a conversation about this. I think I have the clip somewhere, but Steve Bannon was like, "This is a horrible plan. This sucks. We need to get out of Ukraine fully. We shouldn't have anything to do with it. We should have no economic ties. We need to get out of it, full stop. If we are in it, then we're in it." Basically, that this is the mineral deal is kind of a play in order to keep the United States invested in the country in a way where, well, of course, we want to maintain our security. We want to be able to get the minerals. In order to get the minerals, we need Ukraine to be secure. If Ukraine is secure, then Zelensky gets what he ultimately wants in regards to the U.S. entanglement in Ukraine. That's the way Bannon is looking at it. Give me a take on that point of view.
Well, I think that if you're going to be investing, at least the other side is working with you, namely Putin, working in a cooperative way on mineral extraction, then you have established a relative peace. But nothing is ever absolute in this game, and that's why I think Trump is basically saying the U.S. Role in conducting the war is over. And if the Europeans want to go at it, they're on their own. And then Russia can do whatever it wants. And because Trump looks at everything in terms of contributions and donations and how much you've put into something, particularly now he wants 5% NATO if they're going to be protected, but they can't even do 3%. Then it's clear that for him that makes it easy in terms of the decision making process, it seems, and that's how he gauges it, and that's why he sees a more lucrative opportunity by working with Putin and by extracting the minerals out of Ukraine in order to get something back for the U.S. investment of actually it's up to about $300 billion. So we would be breaking even financially if we could extract it all.
I'm going to play the clip just because I want to do Bannon fair, and see if you changes this. I kind of agree with him. I mean, I get your point that if Russia is involved in this, then all parties are equally represented.
Yeah.
So no, I do get it.
Saying that in exchange for your agreement to this partnership, U.S. aid will continue. Donald Trump himself said it's kind of haphazardly, but he did say aid could continue under this framework. It seems like this is a further entanglement of the U.S. in Ukraine, and who's going to extract the rare minerals? Much of them are under Russian occupation.
My advice is walk the fuck away. I want to walk away so hard. I'm even prepared to say, okay, maybe we don't even investigate, which I think we have to, but we have to walk away. I don't want their minerals. Okay, there's enough minerals in the rest of the world.
What's the reasoning behind this proposal now? Like, why?
I think President Trump looks at Iraq and looks at other places in Afghanistan, and I think as a deal guy, he's sitting there going, "Look, remember in Iraq and Afghanistan,
They didn't take the oil.
the net present already didn't take the minerals in Afghanistan. The net present value of our expedition was $9 trillion. Think of what this country would be like that if in the last 20 years we spent $9 trillion in rebuilding America, the factories would have. What would Detroit be like? What would St. Louis be like?
Michael, Steve Bannon is fascinating to me. As a lefty, I listen to that and think to myself, yeah, he's right. What would $10 trillion have done to America if we invested that money as opposed to going blowing stuff
Well,
up?
I've been saying that for years with respect to Iraq.
Yeah.
And where when you combine the amounts of Iraq and Afghanistan, the amount of treasure we poured in there and the lives that were lost, it amounts to more than $9 trillion, and which could have been applied to our domestic posture. But that wasn't the thinking of the neocons. I think Bannon is about half right. I think that's why you don't see him as an advisor to
right. right.
Because
it's like half of what he
he's
says.
not on board with the Trump approach. Trump wants to get something back for the investment the United States put into it. At least it shows, and it also allows us to integrate ourselves with the outside world and not appear to be isolationists, but we're doing it more on an economic basis than a military basis. And
then why do you think, I'm sorry to interrupt, why do you think Boris Johnson came out and agreed with the deal then? Like, if Bannon is saying, okay, this is a horrible idea, we should not be entangling ourselves like this. And then Boris Johnson, who is a complete advocate for the war, even to this day, is like, hey, this is a great idea. Initially,
I think he saw the handwriting on the wall.
Oh, you think that's what it is? He's just been bent to form. It's not.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know he was full board to encourage Zelensky to go full speed ahead and arm, and then we'll back you up. That was then. This is now. This is the new reality, and he obviously is trying to ingratiate himself with Trump. And I hope that Trump is wise to him and does. I would imagine they look upon themselves as good buddies and all that stuff. But the reality is that he got us more into this conflict. He actually advised against Ukraine signing Minsk II. And if Minsk II was signed, we wouldn't be having this trouble today.
Yeah. Michael, man, I always appreciate these conversations with you. I really do. Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof is a senior policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense. He's a regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of experience in the Department of Defense. Michael, my man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
You have a good one. Oh, that is fascinating. Look, the reason why I asked that question is you get somebody like Boris Johnson, who is a full-throated advocate of the war, who wanted it to continue, who is the guy who parachuted in. He didn't use a parachute, we just used it being hyperbolic, in order to tell Zelensky, keep going. You will not get security guarantees from us. You will keep fighting. We will help you economically. We will help you militarily. We will do all that stuff, but you are going to keep fighting. Zelensky agrees. Okay, fair enough. It is weird to me that he comes out after saying, okay, this is extortion that Donald Trump is doing, to being somewhat of an advocate for the deal. And if you listen to Bannon, Bannon's point is, I don't want to be entangled in Ukraine at all. I want to be out. Even if it's out and not have an investigation, I want to be out. We have wasted trillions on these foreign policy wars. We need to stop. That point is correct. Like I said, Bannon is Bannon is a weird case for me because he always gets his moniker as being a white nationalist. When he was running with Trump, he was the populist aspect of Trump in an economic sense. Now, if Trump gets elected under Bannon, working with Bannon, do they invest that money into America? That's the rub. We're talking about the Republican Party, no less. They tend to cut stuff and give themselves and their donors tax cuts. That money doesn't necessarily come back to the American public. As a lefty, any lefty would agree with that. We spent $10 trillion. What could we have done to America with $10 trillion? What do our subways look like? Do we have high-speed rail? What do our airplanes? Are they falling out of the sky? What can you do with that money? It's that part. And so when you're looking at Ukraine, you're thinking we spent $350 billion in this. What could we have done with the money? It's that. Now, I agree with Bannon on this, but the catch is always, what do you do with the money? What do you do with the money? It's that part. It sounds like Bannon's thing is, I don't want to be entangled in Ukraine. And for Boris Johnson, it could be, I don't want to break ties with Trump. But it also could be, if America is entangled in Ukraine with resource wealth, maybe that is a kind of security guarantee because America is want to protect its investment, meaning that it's an entanglement issue that Johnson may be agreeing with, or for that matter, that, what's his name, doesn't. Oh, it's fascinating. God, the politics of this is fascinating because all of these countries are maneuvering to try to, let's say, maintain what they consider to be their best interests. You're included. It's fascinating.